I'm a little shorter than Amy. Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be here and very humbled to be here at your very first Hallam Burn Foundation International Conference. Give yourselves a... And I applaud that you have included in this conference so many survivor voices. My hope is that by hearing the many stories today that will have a great impact on the care and the aftercare programs that you are providing now. My burn was about 40 years ago, and I'd like you to imagine something. If you imagine better with your eyes closed, you may close your eyes. If that's uncomfortable, that's okay. But what I'd like you to imagine is a young teacher like this, out for an evening fun birthday party with a friend. And then on the way home at a stoplight, there's a rear end collision that makes the car gas tank explode into flames. And that was the beginning of my burn injury. I was transported to a burn center. I had no idea what a burn center even was. And during that time, I had sustained burns on about 35 to 40% of my body, on my back, my face, my head, my arms, and my hands. And then eventually, the fingers on my right hand had to be amputated. Later, they were able to do a surgery that gave me a grip area so that I could write and do many more functional things. But while I was in the burn center, I was pretty scared. And I was really afraid of looking at myself. And so I avoided any shiny surface or anything that would reflect my image. Never looked in a mirror. However, none of the staff ever realized that because I was tricky. And so the first time that I saw myself was at discharge. And when I went home and looked into the mirror in my bathroom. And this is the image that I saw. I went running and screaming and crying in utter shock, really, and disbelief that anything like this could happen to me. And that was the first day of my emotional, spiritual, and psychological healing. So, because of what I went through, I would certainly encourage every healthcare provider to make sure that a patient is supported in seeing his or her face before discharge with hopefully, someone that they're close to on the team, a family member, and a mental health provider. Just as a suggestion of some of the people that could be there. During the next 6 months, I learned that hope is greater than despair, but I also faced many community reentry challenges. As you can, these kind of white masks are no longer used, thankfully, because you can imagine all of the unwanted attention that I gathered everywhere I went people's heads would just almost have whiplash watching me and looking at me, whether I went to a restaurant, the grocery store, or just for a walk in the neighborhood. It was a very difficult time. And if there had been a Phoenix Society during that time, I just know that my level of support would have been better, that the angst and suffering that I was having emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically could have been greatly reduced, not only through peer support, but also through many of the programs of the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors. I had a rather long reconstructive process, and I had to have my nose rebuilt, and my eyelids wouldn't close, so those had to have extra skin added. My lips and the lower part of my face had become really rampant with the growth of the scarring. And so there started the reconstructive process. And during that process, I was also a teacher, and I was single, and I needed to work. So my challenge was to be able to go back to work, but I was also terrified of how 6 different classes of junior high kids were going to receive me or not receive me as their teacher. I was afraid that maybe I would be rejected. Kids would want to be taken out of my class. Maybe their parents would want to be taken out. But I knew that I had to do something to, breach that foundation and make that transition from into the classroom. So that very first week, I told the students all about the car crash, the time in the burn center, surgeries I'd had, ones I would continue to be having over the next few years. And then I had a film that I showed them about the pressure garments that I was wearing that answered a lot of the questions that I was frankly just too insecure to go into. And then I sat on a stool in the front of the room and I invited them to ask all the questions that they wanted. And of course, they asked many, many questions about my recovery and my care and my future. What I didn't realize until about 3 or 4 months later is what a brilliant move that was, because that school reentry program took away a lot of the fear, the unknown, the scariness of somebody or something that they're not educated about or familiar with. And so I really had a wonderful school year. And none of the things that I feared happening ever occurred. So I know that there are many efforts now around the world, not just in the United States, for school reentry programs. And the Phoenix Society online learning programs have a specific program called The Journey Back, which gives survivors, families, teachers, the healthcare professionals, all of the tools that they need to go into a school, educate the staff and the students before a child returns to school, so that the transition to school is more of a friendly one and a one of understanding. The surgeries that we've had don't always, even out the skin tones. Eyebrows don't reappear often when there are grafts, and of course, even the best of plastic surgeons cannot create a symmetrical lip line. So I wanted 3 things. I wanted one color of skin, I wanted some eyebrows again, and I wanted a symmetrical lip line. So I went for some training in the Los Angeles area to learn how to do that. And so these were my initial attempts, and this is one of my photographs of going back, my school pictures. The first year I learned how to do that. And now, again, the Phoenix Society has stepped up, and they provide an online learning program regarding creative cosmetics that takes step by step each phase of the process of creating a harmonious image and a healthy, natural, everyday look. So some of the things that we're really seeking are tools to act with social confidence, competence, be comfortable in any situation, whether it's school, whether it's a work, or any social situation. And as I said before, after discharge and during the reconstructive process, there are often many community reentry challenges for people. Among them are, of course, people staring, lots of intrusive questions, the challenges of returning to school or work, going out in public, starting conversations, new social situations where somebody might not know us from before, and dating and relationships. One of my friends, during the time I was wearing pressure garments from head to toe, decided that I should join a gym that she belonged to. And her name was Linda, and I said, Linda, that's impossible. I can't do that. I'm the only person that would be wearing pressure garments from head to toe. Everybody's going to stare at me. Everybody's projecting that this is what they would think. Why is she at a gym when she definitely looks like a patient? And so Linda is a pretty persuasive young woman, and so she convinced me I should do that. And I'm awfully glad she did, because the lesson I learned with that experience is, yes, the first 3 or 4 times I went, yes, people looked at me, people took a little pause and kind of took, I would say, just glances to figure out what was going on, and then of course I'm sure the word spread through the gym about, oh, that woman has a burn injury and that's why she's wearing those garments. But here is the truth. Those people got over me in about 5 days. I was no longer any big issue. I was no longer any big attention getter, and I was just one of the people that joined the gym. And I've remembered that experience throughout my life, because really, it's just helping people get over our burn injury and getting them used to it. And it was such a lesson. And I think about, I'm very grateful to Linda for doing that, because of the lesson I learned, and it gave me the courage and the understanding to do other things after that time. Some other things that we often have to deal with is, mourning our previous image and our body losses, and, kind of accepting a new normal. And that takes time. And it takes time to start to love yourself the way you are and the way you're not. And I think what healthcare professionals need to remember too is each surgery we have changes our image once again. And we kind of feel like we're stepping back because all of a sudden, our area that's maybe having the surgery is, red and angry looking again, and there's that healing process that we have to go through over and over with each reconstructive surgery. So maybe you're asking yourself, well, why do we even talk about social skills? Well, the reason we do is because in the burn center we don't talk about sometimes the anxiety that we might be feeling or the angst inside that we might experience regarding going out in public again and how our life is going to be. Even though we don't discuss it, it does not mean we're not thinking about it. The social skills training, whether you're a survivor, a parent, a child, a family member, it gives us all a certain kind of, competence about what to do, a confidence, and helps us be in control for the most part in a lot of situations that we find ourselves. Of course, we know that it benefits every age, and every size and severity of burn. Most of you probably haven't heard of Frances Cook McGregor. However, she was the first person in the world. She's from New York City. And she was the first person in the world to do a longitudinal interviews of people with all kinds of facial difference. And I think the part that stands out most dominant for me is that she recognized that those of us with a facial difference often are exposed to naked stares, startle reactions, double takes, whispering, remarks, furtive looks, curiosity, personal questions, advice, manifestations of pity, aversion, laughter, ridicule, and sometimes avoidance, which often results in many burn survivors feeling kind of angry, humiliated, and shameful about their burn injury. And I'm not sure why that dynamic, but it often occurs. So I just want you to be aware of that. Now, the balloons in the air is perhaps I don't know if it's a universal symbol, but one of the things that we talk about is keeping all the balloons in the air, whether you're a parent and your son has been burned and you're challenged with spending time with the rest of the family, with maybe things at your workplace, being at the hospital, dealing with insurance, helping other kids in the family get to sporting events that they want to go to, helping with homework and all kinds of things. And we think of each family member, even children whose parent is burned, they're worried about, who's going to take me to my soccer game? Who's going to help me with my homework? Is my mom going to live? Why can't I go to the burn center maybe and see my mom more often? And there are many challenges that each family member, as we see, faces. And as Amy said, we think of the family members as survivors too. It's not just the person who's the patient at the burn center, but everybody in the family is a survivor. So how we communicate often influences how people respond to us. That's true. That's universal. The words we choose, our voice skills, whether we sound kind of, droll and weak in our voice or enthusiastic and warm, and our non-verbal skills, whether we stand up straight, look people in the eye, things like that, influence how people respond to us. And the good news is, those are things we can control. I was so touched to see the steps on the poster outside, and so gratified to know that these skills aren't just available for people in the United States, but because of technology, they're really available to everybody in the world now. So nobody has to suffer quite the emotional, spiritual, psychological distress that they used to experience. So if I had had these skills at the time, my life would have been a lot easier. And through a lot of heartbreak and difficult situations, I kind of started to figure these things out. So imagine, I think I'll go back one slide. Yes, I want to go back one slide. So our self-talk really is that voice in our head that constantly is jabbering at us, talking to us, telling us our self-worth, or that we can't do something, or who we are as a man or who we are as a woman, talking to us about relationships, awfulizing about the future. And so just to have you be aware about what we say to ourselves and believe is often what we're going to create in our lives. And we don't have to believe our thoughts. So it's very smart of us all to monitor those thoughts, because a lot of them are false, that we can do the things, many of the things that we did before. The other thing I learned was tone of voice. That if I sounded like a victim, people were going to treat me like a victim. And I learned a lot of this by buying things in a store. And I knew that wearing all the pressure garments from head to toe, and my pressure garments on my hands, that when I went up to pay for something at a counter, the clerk at the store would often turn around and look kind of surprised or try to control her response. And that if I used a positive, warm, friendly tone of voice, looked her in the eye, and stood up straight, I could help her over my scars. And that's what you're kind of doing, helping people over our appearance, helping people over our scars, so that they see us, not our burn injury quite so much. As I said, in about 4 days they get over it. If you're in a new school, if you're in a new organization, new job, join a gym, a competitive team, or something like that. And also, a universal thing that binds us all together is a smile. You know, it makes everybody have increased face value, and it softens everything and connects people. Our eye contact and our smiles connect people. I know that most of us, well, I can't communicate with you very well, even though most of you can communicate with me. But the fact that we look each other in the eye and we, greet each other with a smile, That's a wonderful connection, a wonderful connection. So I'm going to have you imagine something again. Imagine yourself getting ready to go to, let's say, a new job, and you know no one, and it's a big office. Imagine yourself walking in to that office environment, not using your steps. And you're going in the front door, and you're reporting to your supervisor, and your supervisor's showing you where you're going to be seated. And there are a lot of people around you, but you're not using your steps. Now think about what that feels like for you. Does that increase your anxiety? Does that increase your discomfort? Now, imagine again that you're walking into that office, and before you walk in, you check yourself. How's my self-talk? All those people are going to just be crazy about me. They're all going to like me. I'm going to like them. I'm going to do a great job. I'm going to contribute to this organization, and it's going to be a terrific experience. All positive self-talk. And I'm going to have a warm, friendly, excited tone of voice. I'm going to look everybody I meet in the eye. I'm going to stand up straight, keep my head up, and I'm going to have a smile on my face when I'm introduced to everybody. What a difference. Don't you feel that emotionally? I mean, just in the audience, I'm feeling better already about that new job. So steps can make a huge difference in how you feel about yourself, and it has a tremendous influence on how other people respond to you. So just asking you some of the questions, you don't have to answer these, but, what are some of the negative things you were saying to yourself? Whoops, sorry, I forgot to proceed. What were some of the things you were saying to yourself? How did you feel emotionally? Did you feel comfortable? Did you want to stop the process? So for healthcare professionals, it's important to remember that it would be wonderful if people were coached, the family members and the survivors, before they're discharged. So they have some idea that people are going to look, mostly because they're curious, not because they're mean or rude, but just because they're curious. They haven't perhaps seen a burn injury before. It's telling the hard truth softly, as one of my friends coined some years ago. Telling the hard truth softly about what's going to be like, but tell the whole family and tell the survivor. So this is just an example of how the conversation might be started. You can contact the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors regarding this whole packet of information if you want to have it for yourself, as well as maybe do a training for your team. And as we say, it's not just one person who, is responsible for this. It can be a variety of people who are capable of this. So, I don't have the touch with this. Uh-oh, I must have broken it. There we go. So what I like to call the folks who are delivering the information, whether it's a peer supporter or someone in the healthcare team, burn care team, is call yourself a coach. Everybody can be a coach. A physician, a nurse, OT, PT, social workers we know, psychologists, the dietitians, pharmacists, and on it goes. So everybody can be a coach. And this can start at the very beginning of care, continue through rehab and beyond, and certainly be a part of the peer support visits. So coaches are needed. The other tool that I want to discuss is rehearse your responses. It's a tool to use when people ask questions like, what in the world happened to you? What did you do to yourself? Why is your skin like that? Has anybody ever had that question? I'm sure you have. So, sometimes people want to have more information besides what you've given them in 3 sentences. Darn it. Okay, in setting your boundaries, if on a day when you maybe just don't feel like talking, you can say, I was burned. Thanks for asking. I don't care to discuss it. Or that's all I care to discuss today. I'm sure you understand. So rehearse your responses. It's so easy. I didn't know this for years. And I'd give people the whole long, drawn-out story. People I was never going to see again because I just felt like I should. And I don't know about your culture, but in our culture, it's not rude to just give, I say, the short story. And that is 3 sentences. As long as you use your steps and you're polite. So, how or when you were burned? Well, I was burned 40 years ago in a car crash. I'm doing a lot better now, and ending the sentence with, thanks for asking, or thanks for your concern. And then if people say, well, what kind of a car were you in, or how did the house fire start? All you have to do is revert to setting your boundaries with, that's all I care to discuss today. I'm sure you understand. Smile warmly at them and keep on going. As long as you use your steps, you're going to do just fine. And it's so much easier to do this with strangers that you're never going to see again, but you're going to give them a polite response. And this is how, whether you're a peer supporter or whether you are a healthcare provider, that you might use this as an example about how to introduce the STEPS tool to a survivor and the family members. Again, you can get this information from the Phoenix Society's website. So again, I stress, coach is needed. Everybody can be a coach. The staring tool, that's the 3rd tool. Whoops, I went too fast. Okay, the staring tool for me meant either staring straight ahead, ignoring the world, or outstaring anyone gawking at me. That's one of my friends who that's the way she approached it. Or some people approach it with an angry verbal response that only leaves them feeling a lot of upset a half hour to an hour later. So, the staring tool. I bet you all want to know what that is. So first of all, of course, you use your steps, right? So you stand up straight, look them in the eye, smile and confidently say, well, this is in English, of course, "Hi, how are you doing? Nice day, isn't it?" Or some kind of friendly small talk. But at least you look them in the eye and speak to them. And what that does is kind of break that barrier. Break that barrier. And they start to see you as a person, not just an object. The staring tool can be very, very effective. And often the person staring smiles back, and the inner face ends with a smile. And this is how, whether you're a peer supporter again or a healthcare professional, that you might introduce the staring tool. And again, you're telling the hard truth softly. Well, we don't have time for practice today, but practice in your mind, okay? Whoopsie. Am I saying this too often? Coaches needed, yes. Oops, I'm doing this wrong. Sorry. This is written, this is very dear and personal to me. This was written by my plastic surgeon regarding a crisis in his own life. And the reason I like it, because the first time I read it, I thought, well, that doesn't just apply to his life. That also applies to my life. Because the fact is that when we first have a crisis, you know, it really does augur nothing but ill. And then the special feature of a crisis is that along with the distress and pain is freedom. Freedom to build again with a new foundation and modern structure using wisdom we didn't have the last time we built. And I think that really applies to a burn injury because it is a crisis. And through the tools that the Phoenix Society and other foundations offer, we can build again and we can have a very successful and productive life. Well, I won't belabor this point, but it is a continuous process for children, teens, and adults. And especially when you also think of children, how important this is for them to be able to have people who can help them through these internal and external challenges that they experience. And the family has many emotions, as we all know, and everybody in the family is affected. Some people feel guilt, helplessness, overprotectiveness, certainly anger, reluctance even to express their own pain, avoidance of getting help for themselves because they're too busy, or they're too involved in other things, or they think they don't need it. And also feeling overwhelmed with care management. And that's why it's really important to teach the family members too, because often they are going home helping with dressing changes and so on. And it's a great time during dressing changes for them to reinforce the social skills. So I have just a moment or two. Do we want to do questions or now, later? Or you may come up to me later and ask any questions. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
네, 그럼 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.